The Delta variant now said to be the most infectious respiratory disease ever seen. Let the games begin. The Summer Olympics are here at last. And Love, Hate, 8 featuring the best part of the opening ceremony. Friday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Friday, July 23rd. I am Jill Wagner here with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Jill, good morning to you. Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, which means, of course, once again, Jill and I will be in the live chat on the YouTube instant premiere for today's podcast. I'm going to drop a direct link to that video in today's newsletter right at the top if you want to check that out. 9 a.m. Eastern time. Ask us your questions. Give us your Love, Hate, 8 suggestions, especially because we're sort of... the cupboard is almost bare. I keep a list. We keep a list of the Love, Hate, 8s that we come up with, and we're running low. So everybody, feel free to hop in there and give us your suggestions.
And I also kept my rollers in today because some people had been asking for them. So here we go. Hope you can take me seriously if you're watching this instead of just listening. All right, let's get to some news here. A year late, billions of dollars in the hole, and amid a state of emergency, the Summer Olympics are underway from Japan. The opening ceremony from a nearly deserted national stadium in Tokyo began at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. local time in Tokyo. It's being broadcast live on NBC. If you can't catch it, NBC is going to be re-airing the whole thing in prime time starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. The first medals are going to be handed out tomorrow in the women's air rifle final. The first major medal events will be in the pool tomorrow night, featuring U.S. star Katie Ledecky going for gold in the women's 400-meter freestyle.
Skateboarding also starts tomorrow. I'm going to be all about the skateboarding, as I said the other day. Maybe surfing too. You know, the Olympics, Jill, really one of the great TV experiences we have, and we can credit NBC, frankly, for a lot of that. They spend mucho dinero trying to make this, must-see television. So I think it'll be fun to watch. I hope so, at least. I think everything is just going to be overshadowed by this virus, but maybe not, right? Maybe, as you've been saying, once this thing gets underway and the torch is lit and the people are out there, we'll all have Olympic fever if we don't have it yet.
I listened to an interview with Japan's prime minister. He spoke to NBC, and they asked him, why are you holding the games, even though most Japanese are against it, according to polls. And he said, Japan made a commitment to the world to host the Olympics. He said 4 billion people are expected to watch. And he wants to uphold the commitment. He said canceling the games was the easy decision. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So there are a few new sports: baseball, softball, karate, skateboarding, as you mentioned, sport climbing and surfing. The sports were picked with a, quote, focus on youth. Surfing and skateboarding are subjective, so there are actually a bunch of websites that will tell you what to look for if you're planning to watch these sports, because it's not as cut and dry as you would think.
I guess they have judges. They must have judges. What is sports climbing?
I kind of think like rock climbing. So it's basically whoever gets the highest quickest.
Well, remember, because everything was messed up, the 2022 Winter Games in Beijing are only 6 months away, if you can believe.
Oh my God, NBC must be losing its mind, by the way. As two NBC alums, I can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, the NBC sports executives probably aren't going to be sleeping for a while. There are already calls for countries to boycott those Beijing Games over China's human rights violations. We'll set that aside for now. There's plenty of time to worry about that. And then in 2024, which is just around the corner, we're back in Paris, then Los Angeles 2028, and then Brisbane, Australia in 2032, which they just announced this week.
Let's talk about the pandemic. The CDC director is warning that the U.S. is at, quote, another pivotal point in the pandemic as the Delta variant tears through under-vaccinated communities. Dr. Rochelle Walensky calling the Delta variant of COVID one of the most infectious respiratory diseases ever seen by scientists, with infected people carrying as much as 1,000 times more virus in their noses than the original strain. Now, because of how contagious the variant is, the Washington Post is reporting that the White House has started to debate whether to urge vaccinated Americans to put their masks back on. In that press conference yesterday, Rochelle Walensky basically saying, look, you still have a lot of protection if you're vaccinated, but if you just want to add another level of protection, it's still up to you. It's an individual choice.
Yeah. I agree with that. Keep an eye on Florida. It's really starting to get hairy down there. Not cases, but I don't worry about cases. Hospitalizations are on the uptick, particularly in Florida. So if you're down there, this is perhaps the moment to really be cautious. I continue to be strongly against the return of mask mandates for the reasons that I've laid out over several podcasts, especially if they're just indeterminate in scope, which I think is one of the big problems here. I think if some city or some town or even some state says, like, listen, we're going to mask back up, right? Because until we get to 70% of people vaccinated, we're in the middle of a wave. Like, that's one thing to me. But these big umbrella mandates that we're talking about, not even mandates, but just even recommendations, I think that they're going to prove to be counter-effectual, if I had to bet. I think, Jill, in our little New York City media bubble, I don't think that we really appreciate sometimes how little respect or faith a lot of Americans have in the so-called public health establishment to do the right thing at this point. There's just been, they have messed up, frankly, too many times. And I'm not blaming anybody. I know that this virus has been extremely unpredictable. But I think that if and when the CDC caves on saying that masks should come back, I think it's just going to be another misstep. And as I said last Friday, there's just no more excuses for that at this point. We know too much now.
So we mentioned yesterday the doctor whose quote went viral when she said,
yep,
patients on their deathbed are asking for the vaccine, and it's too late at that point. What I've been noticing personally in listening to a lot of coverage with doctors and including here on Cheddar, where I've interviewed some, when we were in the throes of COVID last year, you just heard exhaustion from doctors and a lot of despair and just real sadness. What you're hearing now is different. You're hearing exhaustion, but as COVID wings that were shut down a couple of months ago have to now reopen, you're starting to hear anger.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't need to be this way.
Exactly.
We have vaccines. Like, people do not need to get COVID and die from it anymore or get so sick that they need to go to the hospital. You could imagine just how frustrating that is. It's frustrating for us, and we're thinking, okay, now we're gonna have to wear masks again. Can you imagine if you've been battling this thing on the front lines for well over a year, and now it's not a cure, but it's as close to a silver bullet as you're gonna get.
Right.
And yet people just for various reasons are refusing to get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're fighting the virus inside the hospital, and then you're fighting like denial outside the hospital.
On that note, the NFL has actually told teams ahead of the season that if a game has to be postponed because of a COVID outbreak among unvaccinated players, and then it can't be rescheduled, the team with that outbreak is going to have to forfeit and take the loss. The opposing team will be given the win. Players are not going to be paid for the game, and the team with the outbreak must pay the opposing team's expenses. The league is trying to take this hard line as a way to incentivize teams to get to that 85% vaccinated threshold, or else it becomes a competitive disadvantage. The Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, among the first players to have a strong negative reaction to the NFL's move, saying it makes him question his pro football career. He tweeted something about that and then took down the tweet.
Yeah. I mean, could I have less respect for quit? You're an NFL player, right? You're like among the luckiest human beings alive. It's like get vaccinated and shut up, or quit and go do something else with your life. This NFL move, though, Jill, this is a big deal. This is probably among the closest things you can really get to a mandate. And actually, I got to hand it to Roger Goodell. It's pretty clever, I think, turning it into a competitive disadvantage to not have players who are vaccinated. Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield, sort of the opposite of DeAndre Hopkins. He said that it is a competitive disadvantage if you're not vaccinated, and the players need to understand that. Hall of Famer Michael Irvin recently questioned whether unvaccinated players even want to win, which I thought was really something. I mean, kudos to them for coming out strongly on this. According to the NFL, by the way, 14 of the 32 teams in the league have already reached that 85% threshold. Also, just this one other thing, I saw this in Variety this morning. I thought it was kind of funny. Not really funny, but Sean Penn, the actor Sean Penn, he has given an ultimatum to the cast and crew of a TV show that he's working on, saying he's not going to go to the set until every single person is vaccinated. Straight up. Yeah.
So the NFL, what I found pretty fascinating is that they'd already tried bringing in doctors and scientists to talk to the players. Originally, that was going to be their strategy. Like, let's reason with them and present the science. That didn't work. So now they're taking this approach where they're basically saying you're not going to get paid, you're going to get the loss. And it's also this peer pressure type of thing because the whole team, whether you're vaccinated or not, if you have to forfeit because of unvaccinated players, the whole team is not going to get their weekly paycheck.
Exactly. That's why it's clever.
That is a lot of pressure. Even if you don't care about Roger Goodell, you probably do care about the other players on your team.
Exactly.
But I think that we have to look to this as the reason I thought it was fascinating that they tried to go the science route first is because I think a lot of states and like local municipalities are also dealing with that. We've tried the science first, that didn't work.
Carrot
so now
and
what
stick.
are we going to have to do? And is it going to be a model to workplaces which are so hesitant to mandate vaccines? But perhaps that's if you want to get people back in this office safely, considering they said, Rochelle Walensky, who's been practicing for decades, the CDC director, saying she's never seen a virus like the COVID Delta variant and just how contagious it is. It actually shuts down your immune system for a very brief period of time, so you can't even start to naturally create those antibodies.
Right. I think the vaccine mandates, that's the key here. CNN, by the way, just in our industry, they said last week, they're like, you come back to the office and you got to show you're vaccinated, period.
It makes sense to me. Florida, Missouri, and Texas, by the way, they account for 40% of the new cases right now. So that's where we're seeing those huge surges. Texas, on a different note, has started a new approach to handling the surge of migrant crossings at the border, arresting migrants on charges of trespassing and sending them to state prisons on the order of Governor Greg Abbott. Abbott's declared the situation at the border to be a state disaster, which is usually reserved for things like natural disasters like hurricanes. It's a controversial move. It comes amid a sustained crush of illegal crossings along the southern border. U.S. Border Patrol reported nearly 180,000 apprehensions in June, the highest monthly total since the year 2000.
That was last week. This move by Abbott, I think, is technically illegal, I believe, because states aren't supposed to, they're not allowed to enforce federal immigration law. It would only be legal if individual landowners along the border actually pressed trespassing charges against specific migrants. A lot of border counties in the Rio Grande Valley, which is where most of these crossings are happening, aren't even participating in this, saying the border crossings, while sustained and large and something that needs to be dealt with, have not dented their budget or impacted their crime numbers.
A battery startup says it's made a major breakthrough on what's considered to be the holy grail of the renewable energy industry. Form Energy claims that it can make a battery that is able to store energy for days on end using iron pellets, and that would theoretically solve this problem of what to do about solar and wind reliability, as the energy created by those systems could be stored in batteries and then put back into the grid when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing.
I love these stories. I know that some people make fun of me or just like they don't. I don't know. I feel like I'm alone sometimes in appreciating these things. But I
don't think anyone's making fun of you about this. Maybe your Titanic obsession, but not this.
Okay, you're right. It's just that again, as I said yesterday, it's like the climate stuff is so disheartening. Like the news is so disheartening, right? And people write in and they say like, the news has just been, it's hard for me to even listen to the podcast because the news is so depressing lately. And what I want to say to those people is like, look, I mean, this is not the morning zoo with Jay Wags and CeeLo, right? Like this is a news podcast. Like the news is depressing, sort of by definition a lot of the time. But this is really good. This is, the technological advances that we're seeing out there are incredible. This company says that it's going to be able to make these batteries at cost and at scale by 2025. That's just 4 years from now. And it's just another reminder that, while our political system is like irrevocably broken when it comes to climate change, our private industry is really making huge strides when it comes to decarbonization, and we got to promote that stuff whenever we see it.
Okay, only because you just said this, I can't remember who it was who said. When I used to work, obviously I worked NBC, CBS, and we used to, anytime any of the big anchors would talk about news or writing, I would always go and just try to absorb everything that I could. And I don't remember if it was Lester Holt or one of the big names. I remember them talking about just how news can be depressing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they were saying is like, if COVID and rising cases wasn't news, or if like these devastating floods, if that wasn't news, that would be a problem. Like that, what would that mean for our society if that type of stuff wasn't the important thing that you really needed to know about, like if that was just commonplace and not a big deal.
Yes.
So it's just a different way. It's a different spin when the news comes out and it is negative. It is very depressing. But think about it, like that. It's news because it's important and it's like not something that it spins all the time.
Right.
Anyway, just a different way to think, some perspective as we go into Debbie Downer territory sometimes. Venmo announcing this week that it was killing its controversial global feed that shows transactions between not just your friends but complete strangers. The feature had long been considered a privacy nightmare, especially after BuzzFeed was able to use it to easily find President Biden's private account that he used to send money to his grandkids. The White House has since deleted that account. I'm impressed that Biden even had Venmo.
Did he even know how to use it? Yeah.
He's on Peloton. That was going to be the first
right.
kind of privacy complication, because obviously those devices have a lot of information and cameras. But this was always seemed like a pretty weird, bad idea. It was interesting to look at it.
Yeah.
But
remember when Obama came into office and like the big deal was like he wanted to carry a BlackBerry and the Secret Service was like, no, that's way too, it's a national security risk. Now it's like we got the president on Venmo and in the Oval Office.
Trump came in and he's like, you're not taking my phone.
Yeah, exactly. It's a period. As for this Venmo thing, this is big news. Privacy advocates welcoming the change, but they do note that you can still see a person's transactions if you know their Venmo username and they don't have their account set to private, which is still, by the way, not the default option on that app. If you use Venmo, I find it to be among probably the creepiest of the apps that we have, even though I admit that I use it regularly. I pay my rent with it. But at the same time, the banks, I was complaining about this recently. I don't know if it was on the podcast or maybe to Becky. It's all a blur these days. But so Chase Bank, which is my bank, they don't let you do electronic transfers anymore unless it's over Zelle, which is their sort of like Venmo copy. But the problem is Zelle has a $2,000 a day limit. And look, you live in New York City, your rent is more than $2,000 in a lot of times, right?
That's very like Gen Z of you that you're using Venmo to pay rent. I'm impressed.
It's annoying. I have to do it. I have to send like 3 different transactions over 3 days. It's crazy.
Some new music alert, Carlo. Kanye West's long-delayed and much-anticipated album drops today. It's called Donda, named after the rapper's late mother. Kanye debuted the record last night at an event in Atlanta. Donda features a collaboration with Jay-Z, who famously had a falling out with Kanye after their big Watch the Throne collab a decade ago. Now that was a great album. I went on Spotify to try and look for the album. I didn't see it. Is it just not available on streaming platforms yet?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'll have to investigate because usually he puts his stuff on Spotify. Maybe it's later today. Yes, I am looking forward to this as a Kanye fan, although my expectations are rather low given his recent output. Also, just in terms of sort of popular music, The Killers have a new album, August 13th. I don't know if anyone else is a Killers fan out there, but I love them. And if you can ever see The Killers live, or Kanye live for that matter, do it, because they both put on remarkable shows.
All right, let's do a little Love, Hate, 8. One thing that we love, the Parade of Nations part of the opening ceremony, the fashion, the national pride, the history lessons. Now, if only we could stay up past Greece.
I don't think I'm going to make it to Greece. I think I'll probably make it to like Denmark, maybe.
I'm actually about to text my husband to DVR it this morning so I can watch it this afternoon.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good
idea.
idea.
I love the opening ceremony. There's countries, by the way, that I've never even heard of that all of a sudden emerge at the Olympics.
I love the little history lessons the little tidbits that they throw in there, and the Parade of Nations is really cool. It's also a great opportunity for a drinking game if you're looking for one. You can just be like, craziest outfit. Anyway, okay, one thing that we hate this week, people in the window seat. I've had this one in the can for a while here. People in the window seat on the plane who leave the shade down during the whole flight. You know what I'm talking about? So you're sitting in a seat in the sky. Aren't you even a little bit curious to see like what's out there? This is a little, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one here. But Jill, one of these days we should really do an airline-themed love-hate hate. I've got a ton of hates in the chamber. For the TSA liquid rule, can we please get rid of that now? Can they let us bring our water back on the frickin' plane? And another one, couples who book the aisle and the window seat and then leave the middle seat open, so you're like sitting between the couple as they're having a conversation during the whole flight. That is another one. Those people should be charged with capital crimes.
Interesting. It is interesting. The last few flights, weirdly, the last couple of flights that I've been on, there was no window. My husband and I wound up in a
You sure you were on an airplane?
But I'm laughing because I feel like I'm the person who keeps the window closed the whole time. As soon as you said it, I'm like, I'm so guilty of that.
Takeoff and landing. You got to watch.
Maybe not land. Maybe takeoff and landing aside. Other than that. That window is down.
Okay, well, good to know about Jill. All right, and one thing that we ate, an entire box of Petit École. I don't know if anybody knows these. They're those little chocolate wafer cookies that have the little schoolboy on them. You know what I'm talking about? Schoolboy cookies. Anyway, they're very underrated, and I bought a box, and they're really good with coffee. You dunk it in your cappuccino in the morning, boom.
Okay, so one other quick thing. I want to just mention the reason that I wear these rollers is because in 7 minutes from now, I start a show, Wake Up with Cheddar, on Cheddar. It's our morning show. So this is just the way that I kind of multitask in the morning.
So you don't wear them all day?
I do not.
Okay.
Okay, that is what you need to know for Friday, July 23rd.
Guys, have a great weekend. Enjoy the Olympics. See you on Monday.